I'm your host, Larry Rodarte, and we are going to have a great show tonight on Mi Gente On Air. I just want to take the time to invite everybody into the room. I hope you've seen the live stream invite so you can watch this as we talk to an important guest here in our community. And my producer here is with me again. Everybody remember Chandler. Say hi, Chandler.
Hello.
Well, Chandler makes things happen. He pushes the buttons and he has me going live stream here at the studios. And sometimes we may make a mistake. It's a given, but we're going to do our best to make sure that we have a professional show, that we have an informative show, and that we're touching on Latino culture, Latino concerns, and Latino contributions. So we're going to give it a few minutes. We want to invite you all to come into the live stream. You can ask questions of Vanessa Guerra, who is my guest, and you can ask questions of myself, and we will try to answer them, and we'll try to incorporate the live stream audience into the show. So come on in and let's talk business, let's talk culture, let's talk all that we need to talk about in order to be informed. Okay, so we'll be back in about a minute and a half.
Welcome to Mi Gente On Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Buenos noches, bienvenidos, mi gente. Thank you for joining me this evening. I hope everyone is well. Already February is coming to a close and we're headed into March. And things are looking better in terms of the pandemic, and I feel a little bit safer as we go out into the community, but I'm still wearing my mask everywhere I go. If I go to Sam's, I go to Walmart, wherever I go, I still wear my mask, and I encourage everyone to do so. Well, on today's show, I have a dynamic young woman who was elected as our Saginaw County Clerk. Yes, many of you know Vanessa Guerra. She is a former member of the Michigan House of Representatives, a strong Latina, Saginaw native, University of Michigan alum, and when elected was the youngest member of the Michigan legislature. She unseated the Democratic incumbent clerk in the primary election in August of 2020, winning around 65% of the vote. She represents us well, and today we're going to talk about ARPA funding, redistricting, and the upcoming election in August, among many things about this trailblazer. So, Mi Gente On Air, say hello to our county clerk, Vanessa Guerra.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
There she is. I didn't hear her at first, but I hear her now. Vanessa, let's start by telling our listeners who you are, because not everybody knows you, but you have a great following, right, with the name and what you've done. Where you come from, tell us, because it's important for those who may not know?
Yeah. So my name is Vanessa Guerra. I was born and raised here in Saginaw County. All of my family lives here, so I have a long history of contributions that my family have made and that have really brought me to where I am today. One of those, of course, being, as Larry knows, he's very involved with the Civica, and so my great-grandfather was one of the founding members of that organization. And I'm sure, as Larry has said a lot, it's a civic organization that's always been focused on giving back to our community. And in addition to that, my grandmother and my great-grandmother were very involved, Linda Guerra and Socorro Gutierrez, involved in the Hispanic community. And so I think just through the generations, they've instilled in me that passion for helping out my community. And that led me to run for public office. I started off as a Bridgeport Township trustee. So I served at the local level for 2 years, saw an opportunity to do more for my community at the state level, and ran for state representative in 2014. I served in the state house for 6 years, which is the maximum number of years you can serve in the state house. And then because of the experiences I had there, working on the elections committee, and really recognizing how important civic education is to our community, and how much emphasis is not placed on it really as much as it should be, inspired me to want to run for county clerk. And so I was fortunate to have earned people's support in 2020, and I am now serving in my second year of a 4-year term. And the county clerk does sort of 3 main priorities. So one of them most people are familiar with is our vital records office. So it's going to be your birth certificates, death certificates, marriage license, CPL, notary services. And then our circuit court records is the other main part. So where you go to file things like filing for divorce or issues with child custody, things like that. And then the third main duty that we provide, or service that we provide, is overseeing all of the elections throughout Saginaw County. And so those 3 things alone make us a very busy office, but we have a really wonderful team that makes us able to achieve those things.
Well, Vanessa is very humble. She never wants to talk about herself too much, but I want to step back a little bit, because I want to talk about your family a little bit. I know your mother. She's a good friend of mine, Monica Rocha Guerra.
Yes, she's good.
And then your father was Bruno. Well, we don't talk about
Right.
Bruno. Get it?
Yes.
Everybody gets that joke right now. I'm sure he gets that much. Like, we don't talk about Bruno. No,
Right.
But tell us who your parents are, because I mean, these 2 individuals raised a dynamic woman here, and she came out of nowhere, but guess what, she was so young at the time. And I remember you as a young girl and seeing you over at Bronner's Christmas store, and I think she was like 8 years old, and I'm like, this girl, and she goes on to become all this, what she is, a Michigan state representative and the county clerk. And I'm like, man, I should have been nicer to her when she was young. No, just kidding. But anyways, tell us about your parents and your immediate family.
Yes. Yep. So my parents are everything to me. The most important people in my lives and my role models. The story I always tell about my mom that I think really sets the stage for who I became as an adult are 2 things. So when I was little, she worked at Bronner's, as Larry said. And so certainly back in the early 90s, we're seeing more diversity now, but back then, there wasn't as much diversity in ornaments that you bought. And so anytime she would buy an ornament, it would usually be like a cheerleader, and it would be blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin. And so she would have them paint the skin darker and the hair darker, so it looked more like me, because she recognized that it's important to see myself in all spaces, whether it's on TV or in books or in an ornament that I want to put on our Christmas tree. So she did things like that. And then she also always went out of her way to order books that featured Latino kids. Again, in the 90s, not an easy thing to do. Amazon wasn't the way it is. We didn't have bookstores that highlighted, Hispanic Heritage Month or African American History Month like we do now, which is wonderful. And so she really dug hard to find those things. And so I think that just in itself gives you a glimpse of the sort of daughter that she knew that she wanted to raise.
That she was raising,
yes.
And your father comes from entrepreneurs, a line. Tell us about your grandparents in the store over on Washington Street, right across from the Gray Iron plant.
Yeah. Yep. So my great grandparents owned the Guerra's Market over on Washington. And so growing up, I'd been there a few times, but I was quite young when they owned that store. And so I do remember it and going there, but I probably didn't get to grow up there as much as my father did. But my father, so the role that he really played in my life, I think, was that of just, he is a disciplinarian. And so growing up, his motto was, you may think that you have it hard, but somebody out there always has it harder. And so that was just another sort of piece that in my mind made me think like to be so grateful for everything that I have and work hard to ensure that other people have the opportunities that I had growing up. And so he was very involved in making sure that I stayed on track. And if I started something, I was going to finish it because I had a lot of hobbies. So he always made sure, if you're going to do this or if you're going to have a pet, you're going to see it through to the end. And so I think that my, commitment to completing things and being dedicated come a lot from those values that he instilled in me through the way that he brought me up.
And see, Vanessa mentioned the Unión Cívica Mexicana, and her great grandfather was Ruben Garcia, who was one of the founders in 1945 that brought forth this organization. There were 11 men that saw a need in our community to make sure that civil rights of Latinos, not only in Saginaw, but across the state of Michigan, were addressed, and especially the migrant workers. Right. And Ruben Garcia was one of those founders, and his daughter was Socorro, which was your grandmother.
Mm-hmm. My great-grandmother. I called her my great.
Wait, she was your great-grandmother. Yeah. That's right. See, this lineage, I tell you.
Right.
But anyways, Socorro, well, we called her Grandma Skinny because she was a very flaca. And then her daughter was Linda.
Yes.
And Linda's son was your father.
Is my father, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and Linda was instrumental in a lot of advocacy also in our community. So, I mean, Vanessa really comes from a strong lineage of advocators and entrepreneurs. And this is why we're so fortunate in our community. And we are so honored to have you here tonight, Vanessa, because I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
I've known you for so long. I've marched with Vanessa 2 years ago. We were marching for Vanessa Guillen, the atrocity that happened to her over there in Texas. We marched also for racial reckoning in the community as well. And we were both so proud of how Saginaw reacted to the George Floyd incident and those protests. I mean, so we've been through a lot, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and we have to deal with that issue. And so it's been a ride, hasn't it? It really has.
And actually we were together just almost exactly a year ago. I think last time I was on the show was January of last year.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's nice to be back.
Yeah. And, we talked about the insurrection there and, what happened at the State House when you were a state representative. But today we're going to talk more about locally the ARPA funding with the county, with Saginaw County. Let's talk a little bit about that now that we talked about your lineage and all. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So Larry and we were both on a presentation that I had given a couple weeks ago now, where we talked about the county's role in utilizing ARPA dollars. So for those who might not be as familiar, the American Rescue Plan Act set aside $37 million for the county of Saginaw to be used for economic development, housing, public health issues, and really assisting those who were most economically impacted by the effects of the pandemic. So whether it was because they lost their job or their housing or they had a health crisis. And so Saginaw County received $37 million. And now they're in the process of determining how they would like to use that $37 million. They have used so far about $5 million, and a lot of that went towards they bought air filtration system. They're purchasing an air filtration system for the courthouse to ensure that as the public comes in there, that we're, everyone cares a lot more about the quality of our air than we did in the past. So I'm happy about that. They also submitted some funding for premium pay for county employees that worked in person, and then hosting offsite jury trials because the courthouse itself, especially during the height of the pandemic, was much too small to host a jury trial. And because that's a service that we have to continue to provide or want to continue to provide, quite a bit was spent on that. And so they've spent about $5 million. So there's about $32 million left over. And over the course of the last several months, starting in August of last year, the county accepted proposals for requests for funding from internal groups. So I requested some funding for my office, but then also a number of external organizations. And so a lot of community staples came forward and requested money. And so we saw things like First Ward Community Center, the African American Cultural Festival came forward, Crime Stoppers, a lot of community organizations that provide services that do fall within the criteria of the populations that ARPA is designed to help. So the next step will be the commissioners deciding how and how much of the funding that they want to distribute to those organizations, which is going to be a lot of work. But I'm grateful our commissioners are taking it head on, and they themselves will be the ones determining that.
And Vanessa just came here from a meeting with the commissioners.
Yes.
She rushed over here on a night when we have such bad weather, an ice storm coming and approaching. And so, I mean, she really took the time to come and to be here with us tonight. So it's important that we talk with her. And we're going to talk about, equity. Does the proposal address, the ARPA proposal address a change in societal opportunities or eliminate disparity gaps in outcomes for minority or underserved populations? That's an important question.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, and I probably should have clarified the reason I even have some knowledge of what the county's plans are with ARPA dollars is so as county clerk, I also serve as clerk to the Board of Commissioners. And so I'm always quick to highlight, I am not a voting member of the Board of Commissioners, but I am able to, by being clerk, attend all of their committee meetings and general board meetings. And so that was really important for me when I won this seat, is because I like to be in the know of what's going on at the county. And I think a lot of times people overlook the fact that, county commissioners are elected individuals. And just like we hold our state representatives accountable, or city council members or school board members, we have to do the same with our county commissioners. And they're doing good work, but, it's important that we know who those folks are. And yeah, so I think a lot of the proposals that have come forward do address our most in need populations. And what I do like about a number of the organizations that have come forward is that many of them have a track record of providing those sorts of services. So whether it's childcare or tutoring services, or we recently had an organization that came forward and talked about affordable housing, which is a presentation I had also given as well, because that's an issue that's very close to my heart and I'm very passionate about. And so I would think as the commissioners begin to have those conversations, I don't think they're going to necessarily neglect or cut anybody out who's brand new, but I think a lot of weight is given to those organizations who, again, have that history in our community. They know what the needs are, and they have the programs ready to go to be able to use ARPA funding to continue meeting the needs of our community.
And we have to clarify, this is not the ARPA funding that is given to the city of Saginaw.
Yes.
They're given $53 million, correct? And then the Saginaw County was the $37 million.
52 and 37.
52,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Okay, so we want to clarify that to make sure that everyone understands that that's a lot of money coming into our community.
It is. Yeah. And so I think the public has done a really good job, especially at the city level. And again, not being on city council or clerking their meetings, I don't know all of the details, but I think at the city level, the public has been very good about, really letting our city council people know that this is a lot of money, but it's a lot of money for a reason, right? We're supposed to create transformational change with this. It's an opportunity unlike anything we've ever had, because we've gone through something unlike we have in the last 100 years. And so my hope is that also at the county level, our commissioners take that into consideration as well, that while we could do some internal things, this really was funding that is meant to get back out into the community. And so I'm hoping that they will fund a number of external requests through those neighborhood organizations that have come forward. Yeah.
And are you surprised at all at how this has gone down in terms of the process of the whole ARPA? I think the first meeting was in August, wasn't it? August 9th?
Yeah, overall, I've been really pleased and grateful for the way that the commissioners handled it. It was off to a little bit of a slow start, but the county commission decided to host committee of the whole meetings where people could come forward with their proposal and present to the full board. And they held those meetings across the county. And so there was a meeting in Buena Vista. There was one in, I want to say, Spalding, I think we did one in, and in the city of Saginaw as well at the YMCA. There was 5 total that went around the county, and I thought that was really nice for a number of reasons. One, it obviously gets the commissioners out into the community. And so sometimes people feel more comfortable on their home turf, right? And so those folks who live in Buena Vista, it's a lot easier to go to a commissioner meeting when it's right in your own backyard. And so I thought that was really important. And it was also just important to just hear, from people in a presentation. So you're not just reading a white page proposal about something that they want or something that they've been working on, but really you're able to hear and see. A lot of them had videos that they showed about the good work that they've done. And so I thought that was really nice. I was grateful that they spread it around like that.
So, November of 2020, you become Saginaw County Clerk.
Mm-hmm.
Did you envision that this type of work with, I'm talking about the ARPA proposal and all that would be part of your job, and has that, been a challenge to you really as the county clerk?
I would probably, I didn't think that I would be maybe as involved in ARPA, but to be honest, Larry, I like to be involved in everything.
Yes.
So I think I just feel so strongly that the county government plays a very important role in our lives. When you think about who represents us in government, it's the federal government and the state government, and then you're right there at county government. And so I feel like I can just really be a voice piece for community members to know what your county tax dollars are being used for. And so being involved in ARPA has allowed me that opportunity to know what the county's plans are, and then educate and come on shows like this, members of the public, to say, this is what's going on in the county. We do have a full-time MLive reporter that covers government again. So I'm very happy to see that. But for the most part, it is difficult for smaller papers to cover every single board meeting that there is. And sometimes they're really long and there's not always a lot of interesting things on them. And so just being able to be knowledgeable and share that information with folks is what really drew me to getting involved.
Well, what community do you know of? And this isn't a question to Vanessa. I think this is a question to my listeners. What community do you know of that has a representative who is Latina, who is so young, just in her early 30s, is so involved at the county level now, and is knowledgeable and represents us? And we are so fortunate and blessed to have Vanessa as our Saginaw County Clerk, and as a state representative. I don't know of any community in Michigan. I'm sure there's maybe some down in Texas. I don't know. Texas is a whole nother ball game, though.
Texas
right?
is, yeah.
Yeah, but we here in Michigan, we're really blessed, and I think you were the youngest to the state representative until. Who was the one that was younger?
Darren. Well, Latinos. Darren Camilleri came right after me, and he was 23 when he was sworn in, and I was 24 when I was sworn in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it really shows who Vanessa Guerra is by her involvement and her willingness to step up to the plate and run for Saginaw County Clerk, as well as once her tenure was up with the state. As a state representative. So thank you for all that you do, really.
Thank you. I hope you still say that I'm this young 10 years from now when I'm 42.
Yeah, really. We were talking a little bit before we went on the air, about how this COVID pandemic has really affected all of us. We've all been affected. Yeah. And I know that early on in the pandemic, you lost your grandmother.
Yes.
And I had mentioned to you that I was talking to somebody recently, and I said, we were talking about how the pandemic has affected, each of us. And they said that they really didn't know anybody who had passed away from the pandemic, or knew too many people that actually got the virus. And I was like, really? And, it was really a shocker to me because, with my involvement with the Hispanic community, at one time I published, I think there were 20 in Mi Gente that had passed away from the pandemic. And I knew them all. I knew every one of them. I knew your grandmother. I mean, truly, we have been hit hard by this pandemic, Latinos in Saginaw County, throughout the state. And the disparities, I'm wondering, how do you see this, Vanessa, in your role and what you experienced? I'm being a little personal there in regard to your grandmother.
Yeah, that was really tough. So that was at the beginning of 2020, or the beginning of the pandemic, I guess. It was April 2020. And she was older. I think she was 93 at the time, but But, I always think like, well, if the pandemic hadn't happened, she was still had a lot of energy. She was a very sassy woman. And so if whenever I would go visit her, she always asked me if I would bring her a man and a stiff drink. And so even at 93, that was the sort of humor that she had. So that was tough. But during 2020, when I was still in the state house, it just sort of, I took some time, and then I went back to really sharing a lot of information about the state resources. And so during that time, I was very active on social media because we couldn't really be out in public, sharing, these are the funding opportunities that exist. These are the contacts for unemployment, which was a big mess and still is a mess. But, I just thought that was one way I could help people is by getting information out there about resources during a time that, we've not had in years.
Do you think that any of the ARPA funding will help in people of color, and that's why there's a difference as well, from the city funding as well as from the county. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that's built into the ARPA funding is looking at census tracts. And so some of our census tracts of greatest needs are primarily communities of color that exist within, and all of them actually exist within the city of Saginaw. And so when they drafted that piece of legislation, they were very much looking towards assisting those who really need it. And so that's why it is going to be a difficult task for the commissioners and at the city level, city council people, because they have to keep that in mind as they're making these decisions.
Yeah, that is going to be a little bit tough for them, ain't it? Yeah. Well, I really want to encourage everybody to read up as much as they can to know about the ARPA funding. It's a lot of money coming into our community. And, Vanessa's doing her job over there at the Saginaw County Clerk's office. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what she does there with redistricting and the upcoming election in August. And we're going to come back out of break. We're going to go to commercial. But I just want to ask Vanessa real quick. We got less than a minute. Vanessa, what is your take today on Hispanics arriving in the arts? Because we've got the Frida Opera, we've got things going at the Marshall Frederick Sculpting Museum, we've got at the DIA. Tell me a little bit about that.
Obviously, I think we've come a really long way. And actually, my husband and I, our wedding anniversary is coming up, so we plan to go to Chicago. And I don't know if you saw that there was the Van Gogh immersive, but now there's the Frida
one. Yes, I wanted to catch a train and go.
So I'm pretty sure
I'm going
he doesn't know
you.
yet, but we're going to that.
I'm going with you both. If we can march together, we can go on a train and go
and
to
now,
see the Frida immersion.
When I gave the ARPA presentation, I had my Frida mug there. And so you just see these things. And again, they're small things like T-shirts and bumper stickers and coffee mugs, but things that I didn't see growing up as a kid. And you want to see your culture represented in every little aspect that you can.
Yes. Well, we'll be back here on Mi Gente On Air. No te vayas. Well, I want to encourage anybody who may have a question for Vanessa to go ahead and type it into the live stream here, because I know some of you may have a question for her. I mean, we don't typically have the opportunity to have her on the program too often, or to have her unless you're at an event somewhere and you can actually see her and talk to her. But with the whole pandemic shutdown and all, the opportunities were very limited. So I'm really happy that she agreed to come on the show today, talking about after she did the presentation with the Bishop's Breakfast, and then she had a commissioners meeting today, and she rushed over here. So we got a good opportunity here. So I hope that there are people out there in the Facebook world and the live stream that take the opportunity to ask a question of Vanessa Guerra. So go ahead and do that. We're going to come right back from break in how long, Chandler? A minute? And then we'll start the show again, and we'll talk a little bit after the show as well. So thanks for joining us again, everybody.
You're listening to Mi Gente On Air on WSGW.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for being with me tonight here on Mi Gente On Air. It's always a pleasure. And like I've told my producer, Chandler, that I will continue to do this live stream as long as I'm having fun. And I think I'm enjoying myself pretty much week after week because we got some really special guests coming up. And I want my audience to know that I've been fortunate to have Carlos Santana as an upcoming guest. Can you believe that? The legendary Carlos Santana. I am excited. And also next week, I'm going to have Sandra Cisneros, the author. These are great guests. And we also have our local great guests like Vanessa Guerra. And I'm so excited to have her here on the show. And I want to ask her, because, we talk about the ARPA funding. We're going to talk about redistricting. But what made you get into politics? I know it had to do with Katrina and the hurricane.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Larry's heard my life story a few times, as you can tell. Because I get asked to talk a lot about what brought me into it. And so I can actually pinpoint that moment. I was in middle school or still in grade school when Hurricane Katrina happened. And it was my first exposure to what I would call a failure of government. So I went home after school, and I always kind of was into the news. And so the news was on, and I was watching it, and saw all of these people stranded on their rooftops of their houses, surrounded by water. And it just, I guess it always left me thinking, that's America. Like we're raised to think that we're the best country in the world. And, we have all these resources at our fingertips, and that's what we've done to our own people. Or we didn't help them fast enough, right? Because there was the days that went on before we actually got resources to them. And so, that was just a foundational moment for me when I realized that government can help people and it can be good if the right people are in government. And I didn't feel like the right people were in government at that time. And so that's where my connection to realizing the role that politics plays in our life came from, and how I can be a good person. I'm obviously not perfect, but I do my best to represent the people. And I hope that that they'll continue to feel that way, and that they'll let me know when they don't, and that they'll hold me accountable the times when I'm not successful at representing their interests.
But you've had some really incredible support, family support. And I'm not talking just your parents. I'm talking about your younger cousins, your cousins that are around your age. How did they react? And I'm just kind of like throwing that out there. So how did they react when you said, well, I'm going to run for such and such office? Yeah,
I remember we had them all over to my parents' house. I'm pretty organized and do everything big that we're going to do. We're going to do 100%. So we had them over to my parents' house for a dinner. And I announced it to all of them. And it was my running for township trustee. So a lot of them were like, awesome. What's a township trustee? And a lot of them didn't even really live in Bridgeport, but they were the first people to volunteer on my campaign. My aunts made the food for my fundraisers. My little cousins walked in all the parades. My aunts and uncles walked in the parades too. So they have been by my side the entire time. Even, in 2020, we put out a tent because COVID was still going on. So we were all outside and set up tables. My family came and made phone calls for me, calling voters, since it was safer than going door to door. And honestly, the Latino community at large has been so supportive. And I would never expect them to support me just because I'm Latino, but they have really come out. I mean, when my husband and I did yard signs, in 2020, and literally every house we stopped at, when I looked at the name, it was a Latino person. I mean, we had a lot of support from people from all ethnicities, but I just felt like literally every house was like, if there was a brown person that lived there, they had a Vanessa Guerra sign in their yard. And it really made me feel so good.
Yeah, we've got some pictures here. We've got Jennifer Gutierrez's daughter there. Vanessa was a recipient of the Spirit of Frida Award, the political award that we were putting on. I can't even remember what year that was. And she was also a recipient of the Adelante Award.
My whole family came to that.
In 2018, I think that was, before the pandemic. And then we took these great shots. Do you remember these shots over there in downtown Saginaw at the Morley Plaza, so that she could be on the cover of Mi Gente magazine? And there's a great shot of the Huntington building there, the great historic building there in Saginaw. And there's a picture with Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno, her dad, and when the night she won
Yes.
for the Michigan State Representative 95th District. And this
Yep.
is the cover I'm talking about. This was very memorable.
My first magazine cover ever.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
And here, I remember we took a lot of shots there, and I envisioned, I knew what I wanted for the
Yes.
cover,
Mhm.
and I wanted that hair flying a little bit there,
Yes.
and a big smile. And, you know, I was so proud because on the night that we actually published the actual magazine and it came into the area was on a Morley Friday Night Live.
Yes.
And we passed that magazine out, and your mom, it was her moment. She got out there. She was so proud of her daughter, and I said, Monica, just go out there and pass them all out. I don't, you know, I'd rather have her do it than me, you know, but it was such a nice cover, and we had a great story inside. Look at these pictures. I'm trying to put it on the screen here. You know, great shots there. And
she hoarded probably about 100 copies of that magazine.
Did she? I'm gonna have to charge her a fee.
How many years?
8 years later, I'm gonna charge Monica a fee. But you know, Vanessa's mom and I go way back. You know, our time. You know, we're from the same era, pretty much, of Bridgeport High School. And so, you know, it's really nice to see one of our local gals here who is, you know, you're definitely unique, Vanessa, and how you I know a little bit about the background of how she grew up in high school and how she you know, became who she is today, this young, vibrant. I think on the song of the Adelante video, we played This Girl's on Fire as the background music, because you're just doing incredible things. And I want to ask, and I'm sure some of our listeners want to know too, what's next for Vanessa Guerra? You know, I mean, you're going to be, you know, still so busy with the Saginaw County Clerk position, but can you share with us any of your aspirations?
I'm very comfortable where I am right now. I really love what I do. And obviously I'm committed to doing this and to really educating folks about elections. And so Larry had mentioned previously that I was on in 2021 and that this is the first time in 2022, but he doesn't know this, but I'll be on a lot in 2022 because we have major elections going on. And so it'll be a good opportunity to get on the air and remind folks about who and what is going to be on your ballot, and also how to handle absentee ballots. A lot of folks vote absentee, and so we can all use a reminder about how to make sure we're doing that correctly. But yeah, so I really like what I'm doing. I mean, someday, I think the only other thing that I would really like to be someday is probably a judge. I am an attorney, and we do legal work within our office, and so it's not totally outside of the realm. And I think that that's something that I would be good at. And
okay, wait a minute. Did you hear that? She is an attorney. Meaning she went to law school. Oh, yeah. Tell us where you went to law school, because this is, again, an example of Vanessa Guerra being humble. But you know what? This is a time where we need to, you know, lift up our community leaders such as yourself, so that possibly, you know, there's a young Latino out there that, you know, wants to aspire to be an attorney or to be a judge like you, because they see you or whatever. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So I went to the University of Detroit Mercy for law school. I took about a year off between undergrad. After I completed my undergrad studies at the University of Michigan, I took a year off, came home, and then realized that I had always kind of wanted to go to law school. It was in the back of my mind, and my parents have always encouraged me to pursue whatever I wanted, and so they encouraged me to do that, and so I applied and I was accepted. And it took me, because I was in the State House when I was going to law school, and so it's typically a 3-year program. I think it took me about 4 years to complete it, because I was going after, when I got out of Lansing, I got done with work in Lansing, I would then drive to Detroit, and then I'd drive back to Saginaw. So it was a really miserable 4 years. But again, I had amazing staff and family that made it possible for me to be able to study and drive and make it to work and still fulfill my duties as a state representative.
Well, you know, it will be an honor for me in the future to call you Your Honor. I just hope I'm not on the receiving end of it, you know. But, you know, I want to mention something about the Union Civica. We did fundraisers for Vanessa Guerra when she was running. And, you know, I seen when she won the election, you know, I seen her at the House. You know, I seen her in one of the darkest hours of the House. I've seen her, you know, in this county clerk position that she is. But one of the most meaningful times when I was with Vanessa was at the Union Civica Mexicana when she was running for the state representative. And Grandma Mosqueda was in the kitchen, brought you in. Do you remember this?
Yep.
Alicia Mosqueda, an icon in our community, of a woman of faith
Mhm.
who just passed in the last year as well. But she gave you a blessing,
Yes.
and I mean, it just kind of brought that older
Mhm.
generation and with the newer generation, it collided there at the Union Civica Mexicana, and she sent you forth, with God's blessing, and it was such a poignant moment, and to see that it meant something to her and it meant something to
Right.
you, didn't it? Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what you felt there.
I just so have always been very outspoken about how proud I am to be a brown woman, to be a Mexican American woman, and so it just reminded me again of that thing that I love about our culture is that even if it's not necessarily family by blood, that we make people feel like family, because that is something that my grandmas would do to me. Anytime I was over their house, that they always want to get together and pray over people. And so it just really, hit home that like we carry these traditions on with people that we care about, whether they're family or not necessarily, because they're important to our culture. And we see a reason to continue passing that down.
Yes, it was so important. So let's talk about the redistricting.
Yeah.
And that's such an important issue right now as well. And in your role, in your capacity there as a Saginaw County clerk, I mean, it is your job to inform the people about this. So go at it.
Yep. So there's a couple of things with redistricting. Most people are probably familiar with a state redistricting. So you recall in 2018, voters passed proposal, I think it was proposal 2 of 2018, creating the Independent Redistricting Citizens Redistricting Commission. And it passed with, I want to say like 63 or 65% of the vote, where we said that from now on, we want an independent board to determine what our districts look like. And when I'm talking about districts, we have the state of Michigan, of course, and there it is broken up into different land sections, different districts. And within those districts, you have somebody who represents you at the state Senate level, and then also at the state House level, and then the congressional level as well. So congressional district, you have a Senate district, and you have a House district. And so we elected or passed this proposal that said there's now going to be an independent board that determines what the new map will look like, what those new districts will look like. And so they completed their work in December of last year. And they put out the maps, the new maps. There's a couple pending lawsuits, and so they are not finalized yet, but they are the most final version of a map that we have. So we're moving forward so far as if they're in place until a court tells us otherwise. But Saginaw County changed in that we previously had 3 state representatives that represented Saginaw County, and now we will transition to having 4 state representatives. At the state Senate level, we had 1 state senator. We will now have 3 state senators that represent the Saginaw County area. And then at the congressional level, we previously had 2 congresspersons that represented Saginaw County. So Congressman Kildee and Congressman Molinar. Moving forward, there will only be one congressional district. And so I think we're the fighting 8th now. We used to be the fighting 5th congressional district, but now we're the 8th. And so we'll figure out who wins that election come August and November. Really November. But yeah, so the maps have changed a bit. They've also changed at the county level as well. And so also at the county level, we have districts where you have a county commissioner who represents you. And it all sounds probably a little, I mean, I get really excited about it because work is important to me and I'm interested in it. But it is really important to talk about this because we don't want folks going to the polls in August and November and saying, well, I used to live in the 95th district, or I used to live in the 5th congressional district, or in the 32nd Senate district, and being confused. And so I will continue to be out talking about these new maps and these new districts so that people feel comfortable and confident about which district they live in. Now, as the county clerk, I am a partisan elected individual, but really the work that we do is nonpartisan. So I won't be out advocating that you vote for necessarily one person or the other. In my personal time, I may do that, and offline, I may do that. But as the county clerk, my goal is just to make sure you know who and what is on the ballot. And that includes knowing which district you live in.
Yeah, and that is so important. And so, I want to give you the opportunity at any time when you want to come on the show, because our people need to be informed. And I'm not talking just Latinos. I'm talking about our community in general. Right. It's so important now. And tell us a little bit, because we're running out of time here. I want to give you the time and the opportunity to talk about the election in August as well.
Yep. So there'll be two major elections. There some communities may have a May election, but none of our big communities have a May election. I think Hemlock is one of them. But in August is the big primary. So in the primary election, August, those are elections in which you have people from the same party running against each other. And so here in Michigan, the law is that when you go into a vote in a primary election, you have to choose whether you're voting on the Democratic side of the ticket or the Republican side of the ticket. Lots of folks don't like that. And I understand because people often and should vote based on the candidate, not necessarily based on the party. But our Michigan August primaries, that is how they're designed. So whether you like it or not, that's how it's designed. So in August, you'll see county commissioners who are from the same party running against each other. And then it's really in November where you're going to see our big ticket races. So candidates for governor, for attorney general, secretary of state. And again, there'll be two people from two different parties running against each other. County commissioners from different parties. We'll have a 10th Circuit judgeship that will be up as well. That'll be on the ballot this year. But those are probably the biggest ones. We may have a few small local townships where if there was a resignation or something, they could have an election. But for the most part, the big ticket is going to be the governor's race.
Yes. And I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I think it'll be just as big, and they'll spend just as much money here almost as they did during the 2020 presidential election.
Yes,
we
I
have
think so too.
A very famous or infamous, deciding on which side of the aisle you're on, governor, and so a lot of people will come out for that election.
Definitely, it's gonna be contentious, but I have a few people on here that are leaving comments, and one of them is Angela Blanco. I don't know if you know her, but anyway, she says "Si se puede, Vanessa Guerra," and she says, "Hey, talk about when she met Dolores Huerta." So again, another Latina icon meeting a local Latina icon. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that just another example of how Mika and my mom and Larry knew that I had a passion, that I was interested in politics, interested in organizing, and particularly around of those leaders of color. And so when she came, they made sure that I was able to attend that event. And just again, like all of these moments build onto each other, and really, I think, have led me to be the sort of leader that I hope I'm being, and that I still know I can grow into, because of leaders like Dolores Huerta and the opportunity to have met her in my life. Like how many people, get to say that. So.
Yeah, and what an icon she is. She's now like 92 years old as well, out in California. And I don't think she's traveling as much as when she came to Saginaw for the Adelante Awards, the premier Adelante Awards in 2010.
And congrats to you for getting, that's a big deal.
Well,
that's
try.
a really big deal.
Thank you. Growing up and knowing what Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta mean to our community and to our country, it was a big deal. And I want to mention in Grand Rapids today, the March Committee and my good friend Lupe Ramos Montigne are celebrating the changing of the name of a street to Cesar Chavez Avenue, as well as Martin Luther King. They've got two streets that they're changing the names to represent these great American icons. And so congratulations to Lupe and the March committee over there in Grand Rapids and the city of Grand Rapids for recognizing great leaders in our community. I've also got Martha Cap on the live stream here. She says, "Thanks for having Vanessa. She is awesome." So that's Angela's mama. And then we got Robert Escamilla as well as Renee Martinez, and they're saying, "Hi, Vanessa." They just want to say hi. And it's I know that so many of my generation, we see this young Latina who is making waves here in Saginaw County, and then you've got your generation of Latinos. You're a great role model, and it's do you find that kind of daunting sometimes as a leader in our community?
Yeah, I think that there are, I had really good parents and a really good support system, and so but I still in a lot of ways sort of had to be asked to run. Like it was something that I was interested in. But I'm a Democrat. And so I started to get involved in the Democratic Party. And so it just reminds me that there are, Larry's sound unique and I appreciate it. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of really strong, educated Latino men and women who could be leaders in this community. But we really have to take time to encourage them to step up to the plate, to tell them that you have the resume and you have the passion to run for office or to apply for that position or to be on a board. And so I really hope that, I'm so grateful for all the support I've given, but I want to make sure we are, like you said, growing that next generation and encouraging young people to take those positions. And we have leadership institutes that are doing that. So I'm very appreciative of that. I know Larry's been involved with that before, but even in your own family, if you see a young person that has a potential and a future, and encourage them to take that next step forward, whatever it is for them, whatever that looks like.
And that was so important when Monica Reyes and I started the Hispanic Leadership Institute over at SVSU. My main reasoning why I got involved was because I wanted to see Latinos on the boards. I was being asked to be on several different boards in Saginaw County, and I didn't want to be that token Latino out there. And so, I says, we have to groom young Latinos to actually come and sit on the board and not just be a person that sits on the board, but an active board member who's making a difference. So, that's the reason. And what, to go on what Vanessa's saying, it's so important, whether it's at on a board or at your church or at on
your
on
school,
the government level.
Council.
Yes, it's so important. And so we have not had that many, and I know that Dan Sosa Jr., the late Dan Sosa Jr., as a city councilman, I mean, he did some great things, and he was really, during my time, the only one that I saw that was stepping up to the plate at that time. And he was also the president of the Union Civica. And we mentioned him a lot on this program. And Minnie Rosales and what she did with the Saginaw Board of Education.
Dan is really involved.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really, it's really important because, you got to walk the walk. If you want to see change and you want to see things happening, you got to walk the walk. And it's so important for our gente out there. So we've got 2 minutes left, Vanessa, on this show, and it went really fast. And I just want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the community as we have you on Mi Gente On Air?
Like I said, so this is an election year. And so if you are part of an organization or a church or a school group, anything like that, I really would welcome the opportunity to come and talk about elections. And again, it would be in a nonpartisan fashion. And so if you're part of an institution that requires that to be, please don't worry about that, because my goal is to get out as much as I can to educate people about who and what is on their ballot. And with a lot of the, COVID is still very present in our community, but we're all getting out a little bit more. And obviously we have masks and vaccines now that should make us all more comfortable. And so if there are opportunities, I really welcome the opportunity. And maybe Larry can type my email address, or it's vguerra at saginawcounty.com. So that's always one of the better ways to come see me. If you're in our office and you have any troubles, we have a really great staff, but sometimes issues are complicated. And especially during lunchtime, we're a little short staffed. So if you have any issues, always reach out to me, and just thank you so much for all of the support that I've received. I don't even feel like I deserve it sometimes, but I'm so grateful for it.
You do. And let's vow to have an event at the Civica in the coming months where we can have you come and talk and present, and we'll have good food. We always have good
ballots
food there.
And breakfast.
Yes,
ballots and
there
breakfast.
You go, ballots and breakfast. And I always say that if you're going to have a successful event, you got to have good food.
Yep.
And that doesn't always mean patitos, but that's what we do sell over there. In fact, we got a huge order coming up this Thursday with the Gray Iron Plant. So thankful for them for supporting us. They've got like 40 dinners. So we got our work cut out there. But it's so important, like everything that Vanessa says today. I would encourage all of you to look back at this program, share it with a young person, tell them to listen, tell them to, look at this role model here in our community. And she's not perfect, like she says, but she's pretty darn close. So I want to encourage everybody to watch the show here, Mi Gente On Air. It will be on Sunday in the broadcast on the radio station on WSGW 100.5 FM and 790 AM, and then it will go into podcasts. So thank you again, Vanessa Guerra, for being with me tonight. It's always a pleasure, and I want to thank all of you for being with me here and listening, taking the time out of your day to listen to me, Larry Rodarte, here on Mi Gente On Air. Adios, hasta luego. Thank you, everybody, for being with us here tonight. I still got Vanessa here, and we've got, some comments here that I just want to read as well. Thanks for letting us know you were going to be on Mi Gente on Air, Vanessa Guerra. Ooh, that's your mama, girl. She said she's kind of reprimanding you there, but and then your aunt Diana Rosea, she says hi, Birdie. How you doing, Birdie? And then we have Renee Martinez again saying good evening. And do you know Renee?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
I do too. She
I
comes
have a
up.
big family.
Yeah, Renee comes over to the Civic and she
Uh-huh.
buys patitos from us.
Yeah.
Every
Renee's
week.
one of my mom's best friends.
Oh, is she
Mhm.
really? Well, now I got something to hold against her.
And
No.
a lifelong supporter.
But Renee, she always makes it difficult. She's got to have no tomato or double rice, or, and I'm like, Renee, come on. This is why we have a backup here. But anyways, thank you, everybody. We have a shining light here. Angela Blanco, I met your mother through Angela. You referred to her as Mika, but that's her name, Angela Blanco. And she's always been a big supporter of you and your mom, and it's just wonderful to see those connections with us here on Mi Gente on Air. And so encourage everybody to, if you've got a question that you want to ask Vanessa, feel free to pick up the phone and call her. I know that she would love to hear from everybody, every once in a while, if it's pertaining to the elections or the ARPA funds or whatever. And that's why we had her on the show here today, because, it's so important. It's so important that we do get
really
involved.
Quick, what is that number?
989-574-0039. And that's just my cell phone number. I give everybody my cell phone number. So.
And it's really nice to see, we have generations watching Mi Gente on Air, and we're getting good numbers. And even my 90-year-old Aunt Della Chantaka is on there. And I want to say hi, Aunt Della. I'm looking forward to the enchiladas on Friday, because we're going to be making enchiladas with her as well. So thank you, everybody. I just, it's so invigorating to me for being involved in the community. It helps me to kind of want to do more when we have guests like Vanessa. We see the great work that she's doing. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, next week we got Sandra Cisneros, the great author who wrote House of Mangoes like 35 years ago, and she's going to be on Mi Gente on Air. And no, Renee, you can't have enchiladas. She's saying enchiladas. I want enchiladas. And then, can you believe it? I'm going to have Carlos Santana on the show as well, the great icon who is just a legendary genius. So I'm really excited. I hope you're excited for me, and I continually invite you to join me. So thanks so much, and thank you, Chandler, for being a great producer that you are. And again, thanks, Vanessa Guerra, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And let's be careful when we go out there. Everybody stay safe, okay? Thank you. Good night.